an executive decision takes a bad turn. A customer who believes they were harmed by that decision files a lawsuit. During the discovery process, it's revealed that the executive who made the decision used AI, not to stress test the decision, not for research, to make the decision. Are you ready to handle that particular crisis communication event? Let's talk about that in this short midweek episode of For Immediate Release. Another fine podcast from the FIR Podcast Network.
This is For Immediate Release, the podcast for communicators.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 512 of For Immediate Release. I'm Neville Hobson.
And I'm Shel Holtz. And the inspiration for this week's report came from a post Brian Solis wrote recently. And in this post, he argued that AI isn't just changing work, it's rewiring how executives make decisions. And once Brian put that in my head, the trend started standing out in other things I was seeing. I'll summarize the numbers and what they mean for communicators right after this. The numbers Brian pulled together are honestly alarming. A Confluent study of UK private sector leaders found that 62% of executives now use AI to make the majority of their decisions. That's not some, it's the majority. 70% say they second-guess themselves when AI disagrees with them, and 46% say they rely on AI more than their own colleagues. And on the U.S. side, SAP's research found that 44% of C-suite executives would reverse a decision they had already planned to make based on AI input. 74% place more confidence in AI advice than the advice they get from family and friends. Meanwhile, McKinsey reports that 92% of companies plan to increase their AI investment over the next 3 years, but only 1% describe themselves as mature in deployment. Money to pay for AI and a sort of blind trust in its abilities are racing ahead of the internal competence to use it. Now, I want to be clear before I go on. I'm not anti-AI. Neville, you know this. Anyone who listens to the show knows I've been beating the drum for AI as a tool for communicators and for business in general for a long time. AI as a thinking partner, a research assistant, a stress tester for ideas, that's enormously valuable. But there's a meaningful difference between using AI to inform a decision and using AI to make the decision. And Brian puts this well, AI is becoming the new executive influencer. And the problem is that it hasn't earned that role, at least not yet. So let's talk about what this means for those of us in communication, because the implications are everywhere. Start with employee trust. The implicit deal between an organization and its workforce is that the people at the top got there because they have judgment and experience and pattern recognition that the rest of us don't have, or at least they've been able to employ it really well and get noticed by the people who promote you into those leadership decisions. That's the story the leadership tells, and it's the story employees buy into. Now, imagine the all hands where the CEO announces a major restructuring and somewhere in the Q&A, or worse, on Blind or Reddit a week later, it comes out that the decision was essentially handed to a chatbot. What happens to confidence in leadership? What happens to engagement? What happens to the social contract that says, follow me because I know where we're going? You can't credibly ask people to bring their full selves to work, as they say, while you're outsourcing your own judgment to a language model. Now, extend that to external stakeholders, to investors, customers, regulators, the board. They're paying, and in a lot of cases, they're paying a lot for executive judgment. If a strategic call goes sideways, and, that happens, the explanation that the AI suggested it isn't going to land well. It's going to sound like an abdication, because it is an abdication. And from a crisis communication standpoint, we trusted the algorithm as one of the worst defenses I can imagine. I don't expect that anybody's going to say that, but it doesn't mean it's not going to come out. And just ask anyone who's worked an aviation incident, a financial services failure, or a healthcare AI misfire. Imagine the reaction when either the leader tells people or they learn through a third party, when the afflicted stakeholder hears, well, that's the decision that the AI told me to make. And there's a third implication that I think communicators need to surface inside our organization, and that's the erosion of dissent. And I find this particularly interesting and disturbing. Confluent found that 65% of leaders say decision-making has become less collaborative since adopting AI. The Harvard Business Review just ran a piece arguing the consensus is dead in the AI era. And that may be, but debate isn't consensus. Debate is that friction that exposes bad assumptions. It's what didn't happen at that auto manufacturer. I think it was Volkswagen with their emission standards. People didn't have the psychological safety to feel safe in dissenting against the decisions that were being made. In this case, we're not even looking for it at the leadership level in some cases. And if AI is pushing aside the colleague who would have pushed back, whatever process your organization had for dissent, it just stops functioning. And when dissent dies, so does the early warning system communicators rely on to spot reputational risks before it all gets out of control. So what do? A few things. We push for governance, and if you already have a governance model, push to revisit it. Your governance needs clear declarations of which decisions AI informs versus which ones it actually makes. We coach our executives to talk publicly about how they actually use AI with appropriate humility before the question gets asked for them. We build the internal narrative that human accountability is non-negotiable, no matter how good the model gets. And we keep reminding leadership that machine confidence isn't the same as strategic clarity. But Brian's right. AI is a test of leadership. It's also increasingly a test of communication. Neville?
Well, just to set my position clear on this too, I've been a drum beater for AI as a research assistant, as a useful tool since ChatGPT first came out. So the initial kind of hysterical enthusiasm was tempered over time. But I use a tool every single day in what I do for work or pleasure, for that matter. So it's something I believe strongly in. But I've got this kind of, how could you say, in the back of my mind always is this kind of thought that I don't accept blindly anything the AI assistant tells me if I'm researching something, for instance, and going to make a recommendation about something, let's say, or I'm writing a report, or even something relatively simple like an article for the blog, stuff like that. If I felt, well, I wanted to say this and it's telling me that, that's a simple decision. I'm either going to follow it or not. Typically, when that happens, I'll ask it questions to further that angle. But this is something else, what Brian writes about. And the Register, I've read their piece, tempered with a bit of hysteria, it seems to. I mean, this is a very alarmist piece or argument, you could say. If it's saying, as it is, the survey that the Register reports on, 62% of leaders of private sector companies, and according to the Register, that is owners, founders, CEOs, managing directors of the C-level leaders of various types of companies. It doesn't say sizes, but they use AI to make the majority of the decisions, which leads to some of the alarm bells ringing that you outlined. Like, what if it gets out that the AI made a decision when something goes south? You could flip that. What happens if it gets out that amazing decision that led to the company being massively successful was actually made by an AI? I think it's inevitable you'd have that sort of focus on it alongside more sane arguments, perhaps, you could argue, well, that CEO is pretty smart that he used an AI to help him do that. So as opposed to the other side, which is, geez, you've got to fire this guy. He used an AI and it went wrong. So I think you've got to put some balance there. Also thinking that, which is, I think you mentioned this earlier, and I agree with you, that there are two angles to every question we might ask about this. One is the internal one, internally within an organization, and the other is externally. So it is an interesting point. And one thought as well I had in my mind that, the pragmatic question, I suppose it could be, if a leader changes a decision he or she has made because the AI assistant suggests something different, who actually owns that decision in the end? In fact, whether he changed his mind or not, if the AI said, I recommend you should do this because, and here's the 10 reasons to support that idea, that are different to what the leader was going to do, and he or she made the change decision based on that, who actually owns that decision? Or as I ask myself, is that really the most important question to be answering? But it's still a natural one to arise. And yes, we could run through a long list, really, of here are the implications in this scenario for the employees of the organization, other stakeholders, and the external audiences. But I have to say that Brian's arguments are well made. He sets the scene. The executives are relying heavily on AI. But it then from there goes more into the alarm function. Judgments being reshaped. So the judgment exercised by a leader is obviously so flaky that it can be reshaped by the AI assistants. In other words, that individual is willing to let that happen. I wonder whether this is all part of perhaps the speed with which people are expecting decisions to be made. And indeed, something I was doing this weekend, we're on a holiday weekend here, by the way, so I had time to do this. That was nothing to do with work. It was a personal thing that I was involved with that required analyzing a document that had a lot of financial information in it. And I asked my AI assistant, in this case, Claude, as part of my experiment with Claude, to summarize it and pinpoint the key aspects of this. It did that in about 20 seconds. And that was enough for me to know then what questions I would need to ask it. So to develop it the way I want it, rather than starting from scratch trying to do that. So there's the benefit. But I think treating AI like a trusted advisor, to me, makes a lot of sense. And I'm trying to balance that thought with the alarmist approach to, this is a bad thing. And all these terrible things are going to happen, therefore, and it will all come out. So how does that gel with treating AI like a trusted advisor? Although your point you made, I agree, it hasn't earned the trust in the context of this conversation. So it doesn't mean then leaders are willing to override their own decisions or instincts based on AI input. Well, according to the register, 62% of them said they are, I suppose. If that's true, I think we're in trouble already before it gets any further, I think. So the real challenge, I think you will agree with this, Shell, it's not the tech at all. It's the leadership aspect. It's a human behavioral aspect of this, as is so often the case when people talk about the relationship between the human and the AI, and they just talk about the tech. It's not. It's a human issue. Isn't the cut through all the alarm bells and pluck out something which to me is extremely important, that really doesn't get much airtime, I suppose you could argue, in Brian's report at least. Isn't this really about the whole point of judgment, that someone in a leadership position in an organization is in that position partly because he or she is very good at exercising his or her judgment in the work they do and the decisions that they make? Are we saying then that actually is so fragile that an AI can just overturn all of that in an instant and lead all this. So I guess my point on this is that I'm noting this. I listened to what you said. I haven't read all the surveys that you've mentioned or the other reports, the Harvard Business Review, for instance. I will, but I find this literally the worst case scenario, and that's being pitched as, this is upon us, based on the Register, which, by the way, has a let's call it interesting reputation over the years for some of their reporting, but this is very factual. Their own report is actually quite well written. So what do we make from this then? Should we be worried? I don't think we should if we see this as simply something to note and look at as a communicator, let's say. The role you've got in ensuring that the CEO isn't going to have his or her judgment completely overwhelmed by an AI. I just find the idea of that, frankly, ridiculous in the sense of well, not implying even or even saying that this is the norm. It's a result of surveys. There's other research also supporting some of this, I think. But we should put in perspective that this is, I guess, an inevitable discussion point that's emerging at this stage in the development of AI in organizations. We've reported recently on this podcast how leaders are taking ownership of the AI deployments in their organizations. So, that doesn't mean to say that every company, that's what's happening, because it isn't. But we're seeing that. And then we're seeing other reporting that we have commented on, that employees and other people in other stakeholders related to an organization are unhappy with what's happening with AI rollouts in their organization. So you got all these mixed messages coming left, right, and center, and now this. Doesn't mean that we should, oh my goodness, stop doing this or have a meeting with the CEO and say, what are you doing? No, I don't think so. But we need to note this, nevertheless. I don't believe this is something we should all get terribly alarmed about, Shell, frankly, as long as we apply our own common sense to observing what's going on and making sure we understand the CEO we're supporting as communicators, let's say the leadership teams, that this isn't happening.
Well, I don't think this is the most important issue we're facing with AI. I do think it's a time to worry. Now, I will say that I don't imagine that the CEOs leading the world's biggest companies, the Jamie Dimons, the Josh D'Amaros, the Tim Cooks of the world, are using AI to make important decisions. And you have to wonder, because I don't think they asked in the survey they did, what types of decisions these CEOs are making. Are they the game-changing decisions, the most important decisions they have to make, or are they lower-level decisions? We talk about AI taking all that drudge work off the table. Are they allowing the AI to make decisions associated with that kind of work? But I think as people, and CEOs are people, as they get accustomed to letting AI make decisions, it might get easier and easier to turn bigger and bigger decisions over to AI as time goes by. With any luck, AI is going to get better and better and may earn that trust. But this would cause that decision-making instinct that leaders have based on their experience and their judgment and the other things that got them to that level to atrophy. And I mean, atrophy is happening elsewhere as a result of AI among some groups of people, the ability to write your own thoughts down, to craft your own email, to conduct your own research. As far as CEOs making good decisions with support from AI, I think support from AI is going to become table stakes. I think CEOs who don't know how to use it are going to become dinosaurs in fairly short order, not necessarily the ones who have the job now, but I don't think you're going to see people getting promoted into that position or hired into that position if they don't know how to use AI for decision support and the other things that we see AI becoming used for very effectively at leadership levels. And leaders are using AI, according to most of the research I see.
Yeah.
I wonder, though, if they start turning more and more decisions over to AI, what is the board or the owner going to see as the value of the CEO? If most of this work or much of this work, the majority, according to that Confluence study, is being done by AI. Does that mean that the enormous salaries being paid to the people at the top of the organization are going to decline? Or does it mean that that role changes altogether, or maybe even ceases to exist in favor of some other model? And by the way, I'd love to see the same question posed to people at other levels of the organization, because this probably is not something that is confined to the C-suite, this turning decisions over to AI. I wonder how much it's happening in middle management. I wonder how much it's happening among frontline level workers. If it's at the same level, then it's a company-wide issue that needs to be addressed. That there are going to be some problems that emerge if we don't have, along the Volkswagen lines with their emissions scandal.
That was Dieselgate.
Dieselgate, exactly.
As it was dubbed. Yeah, that was dubbed.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's a good point you make. I agree. And your point you made earlier, too, is actually a critical question. What kind of decisions are we talking about here? Is it on the scale of let's proceed with the merger with this company rather than that one? Or is it something like, should I fit in a stopover on this city on my way to that city to the meeting so I can meet with these people and so forth and achieve these things? Is it that? Or is it even something even more prosaic? What do I get my wife for her birthday next week? I'll have my secretary do it, but the AI could tell me. I mean, that's ridiculous, actually. But it's significant to know what kinds of decisions we're talking about, because I've not seen it referenced, but it's implying, and people are jumping obviously on this, that these are the kind of organization affecting major decisions that are suddenly at risk because an AI is doing it. I find that ridiculous, to be honest. So we need to know what kind of decisions.
Yeah, I mean, in my industry, there's a go, no-go decision on pursuing a project. I cannot imagine, in my wildest imagination, in my organization, anybody turning that decision over to an AI. But what if somewhere in the industry they do and end up pursuing a project that ends up being more trouble than it was worth? Somebody in the organization at that leadership level who was involved in the previous discussions would have known for various reasons, but the AI didn't have the experience and the insight that individual had. That could be a financial problem for the organization.
So the role of the communicator in all of this, and this is not to say that the communicator who works closely with the leadership teams, including the CEI and others in the C-suite, is involved in every single thing they're doing. No, that's not realistic, because they're not. But the communicator's role in preserving human judgment is the right question to ask. What is it in this context? Where do communicators fit in helping leaders balance AI insight with human insight and judgment and experience? So where do they fit in doing all of that? So the two angles that I notice: internal comms. So the communicators act as sense makers, ensuring context, ethics, and human impact remain part of decision making. Externally, they help articulate how AI is used responsibility in the organization, which is increasingly central to trust and reputation. So that addresses the point you made about when it leaks and it gets out that AI did something. I think increasingly we're going to see that point, articulating how AI is used responsibly in an organization.
Yeah.
Because the impact can be huge if rumor builds, which it would do. Oh, the AI is making all the decisions in this company, and why do we need the CEO and all that? So that is, I see, a good role for a communicator to take on and be seen to be the person who is the yes but person, and the key advisor to leadership in these things, which strengthens the communicator's role, in my view.
Yeah.
So There are things we can do to address this. If this is as a bigger problem as these articles make out, I don't believe it's something that we should lose any sleep over right now in the context of everything else that's going on in the organization. Yeah. But nevertheless, we've got respected sources, Harvard Business Review, we've got Deloitte talking about it, and others that we pay attention to because they are credible publications talking about this. Brian seeded an interesting discussion point, it seems to be.
Yeah, and let's look at a very plausible scenario. Let's say somebody sues the organization over a decision that the CEO made or that leadership made that affected them badly, and they feel they deserve compensation for that. In the U.S., anybody can sue anybody for anything. And we have seen some recent lawsuits. Look at the lawsuit that we're seeing play out right now between OpenAI and Elon Musk. And look at the records, the emails that have been surfaced in discovery. Look at the trials that have been held over lawsuits brought by the parents of children who killed themselves because they got encouragement or assistance from ChatGPT, and they sue OpenAI over that. And what they got in discovery was access to the kid's entire ChatGPT history. So you have a shareholder or a customer who sues the company, and in discovery, all of these things come to light. And that's how it gets out. So I think even decision support has to be balanced with other input that you can demonstrate in a courtroom that influenced the decision that was made, so it doesn't look like the decision was completely outsourced to the AI. I think that's an entirely plausible scenario in a lawsuit. So yeah, I think it's something that we need to consider. And as you say, and as I said, there are things that communicators can do about this. One is making sure people are aware of the potential for this situation. And then, as I said, influencing the governance model so that it incorporates decision, if it doesn't already have decision making and decision support in the governance document, it needs to be added. And then making sure that the leaders are talking about how they're using it so it never comes up that they're using it to make a decision of importance in the organization, that it's focused on using it in very effective ways.
Yeah. I mean, I think if the picture you painted of lawsuits and stuff like that are yeah, very possible, and particularly in America, when, as you said, anyone can sue anyone for anything, usually for amazing sums of money, in the billions. Yeah. So maybe what needs to happen in organizations that it would kind of address this amongst other things, which is keeping records so that, for instance, in an organization that has deployed or rolled out AI tools such as chatbots, let's say, but maybe their own version of something like based on ChatGPT or whatever it might be, that it needs to be known that those records, anything you interact with on an AI, whatever level you are in the organization, there's a record kept. Along with anything else, emails, internal reports, you name it, they're monitored and tracked in most organizations. So
AI transcripts of Zoom meetings in which the decisions were made.
Right, exactly. And in fact, so you could all add to that picture even some of these automated note takers. Like Otter and others that are commonly used in intrusive ways in Zoom meetings. And you hear stories of private Zoom meetings where the outcomes of that are disclosed or leak out publicly because someone used one of these tools that summarize things, including the recommendations or suggestions if they were made by anyone. That, if that gets into a law case by the kind of the plaintiffs, that'll be shown out of context. You could be sure of it.
And that's why a lot of organizations are saying to their employees, you can't record these kinds of meetings.
Right. But someone will, and it'll happen. So you need to head that off at the pass, as it were, and have your own structure in place and your communication surrounding it. So, for instance, you have to have very clear narratives around decision ownership, for example. That would help you in crisis situations. That's internal focus. Externally, you've got to communicate your the kind of structure you have for human accountability, not the algorithm said we should do this.
Right.
I mean, we can laugh about it as I am at the moment, but imagine the reality of something like that happening. So I think these are all things that are plausible. I do believe, particularly in the US, I have to say, but hey, it could be anywhere. It isn't complicated to work out a plan of how you would prepare for things like this. But I'd rather look at it not as prepare for worst cases, although you need to. It's to just flip it over a bit and look at the benefits from all of this. And I think, again, not solely the communicator, the individual leader has to be willing to go along with this, that he or she has got to share some of the thinking that he or she is doing and discussion with the assistant, whether it's an AI or anyone else, to realize that you can't do this without full transparency, at least to your advisors, including the communicator.
Yeah, absolutely. And we will be back with a follow-up episode when the inevitable headline surfaces of a company that gets in trouble because it's revealed that the CEO abdicated a decision to AI. Until then, actually until next week, that'll be a 30 for immediate release.